New Zealand may be a small island nation, but its DNA holds a story unlike any other on Earth. Hidden within the genes of its people is the tale of one of the most remarkable journeys in human history, a journey of survival, isolation, and unexpected connections that continue to shape the identity of modern New Zealanders. Scientists have spent decades unlocking the secrets of this unique genetic puzzle, and what they've found challenges everything we thought we knew. From the last great human migration to the genetic footprints of forgotten ancestors, this is the story of why New Zealand DNA is truly one of a kind. Long before European settlers arrived, the ancestors of the Maori undertook one of the most daring voyages in history. Around 750 years ago, Polynesians set sail across the vast Pacific, guided only by the stars, ocean currents, and centuries of inherited knowledge. Their journey brought them to the shores of Aotearoa, New Zealand, the last major landmass to be settled by humans. What makes this even more astonishing is that scientists have traced the exact genetic signature of these original voyagers. The Polynesian motif, a distinct DNA marker found in the B4A1A haplogroup, links modern Maori directly to their East Polynesian ancestors. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Recent DNA studies from ancient burials at Wairau Bar, one of the earliest Maori settlements, show that the first arrivals weren't all from the same genetic background. Multiple unique haplotypes were found, suggesting that the founding population was far more diverse than previously believed. But Maori were not the only ones to leave their mark on New Zealand's genetic landscape. When Europeans arrived in the 19th century, they brought their own genetic influences, mainly from Britain, Scotland, and Ireland. However, modern DNA analysis reveals something unexpected. New Zealanders of European descent don't just carry British DNA. Studies have uncovered Mediterranean, Scandinavian, and even Malagasy, Madagascar, genetic traces in some individuals. These findings suggest a more complex ancestry than historical records alone can explain. And then, there's the overlooked chapter of Chinese migration. During the Otago Gold Rush of the 1860s, Chinese miners arrived in large numbers. Although history largely ignored them, their DNA didn't. Recent genetic research on colonial-era cemeteries in Otago has revealed the distinct genetic signatures of these early Chinese settlers, proving that their presence was more significant than previously acknowledged. So why does New Zealand's DNA look the way it does today? The answer lies in a phenomenon called genetic bottlenecking. When small groups of people settle in new lands, their gene pool becomes limited compared to their original homeland. Over time, this isolation creates unique genetic traits that aren't found anywhere else. This is exactly what happened in New Zealand, both with the Maori and later with European settlers. Certain genetic markers became more pronounced, while others faded away, making the DNA of modern New Zealanders distinct from their ancestral populations. But beyond ancestry, New Zealand's genetic uniqueness also has profound implications for health. Maori DNA has been linked to specific health conditions, including a higher prevalence of type 2 diabetes and gout. Scientists believe this could be due to genetic adaptations that once helped their ancestors survive long oceanic voyages, but now contribute to metabolic disorders in modern environments. These discoveries are not just about the past. They are shaping the future of medicine in New Zealand. By studying the unique genetic traits of its people, researchers are developing better treatments tailored to Maori and Pacifica communities, helping to bridge gaps in healthcare. New Zealand's DNA isn't just a mix of genes. It's a living record of journeys, survival, and resilience. Every strand carries the legacy of those who came before, from the Polynesian navigators, who braved the Pacific, to the European and Asian settlers who made this land their home. And as genetic research continues to advance, there's no doubt that even more surprising discoveries await. What hidden stories are still locked in the DNA of New Zealanders? What connections to the past remain undiscovered? New Zealand's genetic history is not just about where its people came from. It's also about how those origins shaped who they are today. DNA tells a story far beyond the simple labels of Maori or European. It reveals deep connections between past and present, showing how migration, adaptation, and even unexpected intermixing have created a population unlike any other. But there's one question that has puzzled scientists for decades. Why do New Zealanders carry certain genetic traits that are rarely found elsewhere? The answers are surprising, and they go back much further than most would expect. One of the most striking findings in New Zealand's DNA research is the genetic link between Maori and ancient East Polynesians. But the journey to Aotearoa was only the final chapter of a much older story. Genetic analysis traces Maori ancestry back through the Pacific to the islands of Samoa, Tonga, and the Cook Islands, and even further, to Taiwan, where the ancestors of Polynesians first set sail thousands of years ago. This incredible migration left distinct genetic markers along the way, but by the time these voyagers reached New Zealand, their DNA had already undergone changes due to centuries of adaptation. The colder climate and different food sources in New Zealand forced even more rapid genetic shifts, leading to unique traits that set Maori apart from their Polynesian relatives. But what about the European settlers who arrived in the 1800s? Their DNA is just as complex. While many assume that most New Zealanders of European descent are simply British, genetic testing reveals a much wider heritage. Scandinavian, German, Dutch, and even Middle Eastern traces have been found in New Zealand's European population. This suggests that the people who came to New Zealand were already part of mixed European lineages, carrying genes from migrations that happened centuries before they ever set foot in the Pacific. And as these settlers built their lives in New Zealand, something fascinating happened. Their genes mixed with the local population, creating new genetic combinations that didn't exist before. One of the most overlooked influences on New Zealand's DNA is the early Chinese migration. During the 19th century gold rush, Chinese miners traveled to Otago in search of fortune, but their presence was largely forgotten in mainstream history. Recent genetic studies, however, prove that their impact was more significant than previously thought. By analyzing skeletal remains from 1800 cemeteries, researchers discovered that many individuals thought to be of European descent actually carried Asian maternal DNA. This means that intermarriage and cultural blending happened far more often than recorded history suggests. These forgotten connections are now being uncovered, reshaping our understanding of how diverse New Zealand's early population truly was. But genetic diversity doesn't just shape ancestry. It also plays a crucial role in health. Scientists have uncovered genetic patterns in New Zealand's population that influence disease susceptibility, metabolism, and even physical endurance. For example, a rare genetic variant linked to insulin resistance has been found at higher rates in Maori and Pacifica populations, helping explain the higher prevalence of diabetes. Meanwhile, European-descended New Zealanders carry unique immune system adaptations that may have been inherited from ancient migrations through colder climates. Even traits like muscle composition and oxygen efficiency show subtle genetic differences between populations, revealing how ancestry influences more than just appearance. As genetic research continues to evolve, one thing becomes clear. New Zealand's DNA is not just a collection of genes, it's a living archive of history, movement, and adaptation. It holds the echoes of ancient voyagers, forgotten migrations, and hidden connections that continue to shape the nation today. And with every new discovery, the story becomes even richer. How many more secrets remain locked in the DNA of New Zealanders? What other connections to the past are waiting to be uncovered? New Zealand's genetic makeup is filled with surprises, and one of the most unexpected findings comes from its deep ancestral roots. While many assume the country's genetic story begins with the arrival of Polynesians and Europeans, the reality is far more complex. DNA evidence has revealed links to ancient populations that were never part of recorded history, raising new questions about who may have reached New Zealand long before traditional accounts suggest. One of the most fascinating discoveries comes from studying the mitochondrial DNA of early Maori. While their primary ancestry connects them to Polynesia, a closer look at genetic markers shows traces of unexpected lineages. Some of these markers link back to the indigenous groups of Taiwan and Southeast Asia, while others point toward early interactions with populations in Melanesia. These genetic traces don't mean entire groups migrated, but they do suggest that early Polynesians mixed with different peoples during their journey across the Pacific, carrying a blend of ancient lineages with them to New Zealand. Even more surprising is the discovery of European and Middle Eastern DNA in remains from pre-colonial New Zealand. How could these markers exist in a place that, according to history books, had no contact with the outside world before the 1600s? Some theories suggest that shipwrecked sailors or early traders may have made it to New Zealand long before recorded European exploration. Others believe that some genetic markers could have arrived indirectly through Polynesian trade networks, passing from one island to another over generations. But Polynesian and European ancestry are only part of the equation. Recent studies of ancient cemeteries have uncovered genetic evidence of East Asian ancestry in early settlers. This supports historical records indicating that Chinese miners and traders arrived in New Zealand much earlier than previously assumed. Some skeletal remains, once believed to belong to Europeans based on burial style and artifacts, actually carry genetic markers linked to China and other parts of Asia. This suggests that early Asian communities were more integrated into colonial society than historical records acknowledge, reshaping our understanding of New Zealand's diverse genetic landscape. Beyond human DNA, another layer of history is hidden in New Zealand's environment. Scientists have begun analyzing ancient environmental DNA, traces of genetic material left behind in soil, water, and even ice. This research has revealed that long-extinct animal species once thrived in New Zealand, but it has also uncovered traces of human activity in places where no archaeological evidence exists. Could this mean that unknown groups reached New Zealand long before the accepted timeline? The possibility remains open, and genetic research continues to challenge everything we thought we knew about early human movement. As science advances, so does our ability to uncover lost histories written in DNA. Each new discovery brings us closer to understanding the full picture of who arrived in New Zealand, when they came, and how they shaped the genetic identity of the people who live there today. But with every answer, new mysteries emerge. If forgotten migrations and hidden genetic links are still being uncovered, what else could be waiting to be found? New Zealand's genetic landscape isn't just diverse, it's evolving. DNA research has revealed that the population of Aotearoa isn't a fixed snapshot of the past, but a constantly shifting mosaic, shaped by centuries of movement, adaptation, and change. Every wave of migration, every new community, and even environmental factors have left their mark on the genetic code of New Zealanders today. But what's truly fascinating is how modern DNA differs from the genetic makeup of the past, revealing a history far more dynamic than once imagined. One of the most striking genetic shifts is the decline of ancient Polynesian diversity. Early Maori settlers carried a variety of genetic lineages, but modern Maori populations show a much narrower genetic range. This bottleneck effect wasn't just the result of early migrations. It was intensified by European colonization, disease outbreaks, and population decline. Many unique Polynesian haplotypes that once existed in New Zealand may have vanished entirely, leaving only fragments of a once diverse genetic heritage. Meanwhile, the genetic influence of Europeans has grown significantly. The early European settlers were a mix of British, Scottish, and Irish immigrants, but their descendants today carry an even broader range of ancestry due to intermarriage with later waves of migrants. Genetic studies show markers from French, German, Scandinavian, and even Eastern European populations appearing in New Zealand's modern gene pool. This expansion reflects the increasing multicultural nature of the country, shifting away from the traditionally British-dominated genetic identity of the colonial era. Another unexpected transformation has been the growing influence of Asian ancestry. Although early Chinese and Indian migrants faced legal barriers and social exclusion, their descendants have become an integral part of New Zealand's genetic fabric. DNA studies of modern New Zealanders reveal that South and East Asian lineages have steadily increased over the past century, especially in urban centers like Auckland. The genetic contributions of these communities are now as significant as those of some early European groups, reshaping the country's genetic profile in ways that historical records alone could never fully capture. Environmental and lifestyle factors have also played a role in genetic adaptation. For instance, studies suggest that certain metabolic disorders, which disproportionately affect Maori and Pacifica populations, may be linked to ancient survival strategies encoded in their DNA. These genetic traits, once advantageous in environments with food scarcity, now contribute to higher rates of conditions like diabetes in modern settings. Similarly, European New Zealanders show genetic adaptations to colder climates, a legacy of their Northern Hemisphere ancestry, despite living in a much milder environment today. But the biggest revelation? New Zealand's genetic story is far from over. Immigration continues to introduce new DNA into the population, adding layers to an already complex genetic identity. Each new generation carries a more diverse mix of ancestry than the one before, making New Zealand one of the fastest evolving genetic landscapes in the world. What does this mean for the future? Will some genetic lineages disappear entirely? Will new traits emerge as different populations continue to blend? The answers lie not in history books, but in the DNA of the generations yet to come. New Zealand's DNA isn't just unique, it's mysterious. Beneath the surface of recorded history lies a deeper, genetic story waiting to be uncovered. Ancient DNA analysis has started to rewrite what we thought we knew about the origins of New Zealand's early inhabitants. And the truth? It's even more fascinating than the myths. For years, the dominant narrative was that Maori arrived in New Zealand from East Polynesia in a single, rapid migration. But DNA evidence suggests a more complex reality. The genetic diversity found in early Maori remains, like those at Wairau Bar, indicates that multiple waves of settlers may have arrived over time, each carrying slightly different genetic markers. Some of these lineages are rare or even missing in modern Maori populations, raising an intriguing question. What happened to these early genetic signatures? Did they fade due to population changes? Or is there another, yet undiscovered, chapter in the story? Even more surprising is the presence of genetic markers not typically associated with Polynesia. Ancient DNA studies have hinted at unexpected connections. Some early remains show mitochondrial haplogroups that are distinct from the most common Polynesian lineage, B4A1A1A. Could this mean that early settlers had contact with other populations before arriving in New Zealand? And if so, where did these other influences come from? The genetic evidence challenges the idea of a single, uniform ancestry, suggesting that New Zealand's first inhabitants were more diverse than previously thought. Then there's the enigma of the Chinese miners who arrived during the Otago Gold Rush in the 1860s. Historical records suggest a predominantly male population, with many intending to return to China. But genetic studies of historic cemetery remains paint a different picture. Some Chinese individuals buried in New Zealand show genetic blending with European or Maori lineages. This suggests that despite the hardships and discrimination they faced, some of these miners put down roots, forming family lines that may still be present in the modern gene pool. Could there be New Zealanders today who carry a genetic legacy they never expected? Another layer of mystery surrounds the influence of extinct species on the genetic landscape. Ancient environmental DNA, recovered from sediments, bones, and even preserved plant material, reveals that early Maori lived alongside species that no longer exist today. The disappearance of these species coincided with human settlement, but could they have played a role in shaping the genetic adaptation of early Maori? Some scientists believe that exposure to now extinct pathogens or dietary shifts caused by environmental changes may have influenced genetic traits in ways we are only beginning to understand. Every genetic discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, but it also raises new questions. How many lost lineages remain undiscovered? Could future DNA studies uncover genetic influences we never imagined? And what hidden histories are still waiting to be revealed in the genes of New Zealanders today? New Zealand's genetic makeup holds another extraordinary secret, one that ties together the deep past and the modern world in a way few places on Earth can claim. The genetic code of its people is more than a record of ancestry. It's a living testament to survival, adaptation, and transformation over centuries. One of the most compelling aspects of New Zealand's DNA is how it reflects extreme environmental adaptation. Early Maori settlers arrived in a land vastly different from the tropical islands of their ancestors. They faced freezing winters, towering mountains, and an ecosystem teeming with unfamiliar species. Over generations, natural selection may have played a role in fine-tuning their genetic resilience. Some researchers suggest that metabolic and immune system adaptations could have occurred in response to this dramatic shift, possibly influencing everything from disease resistance to energy storage. Could this explain why modern Maori and Pacific populations have higher rates of conditions like type 2 diabetes and gout? The answer may lie buried in the ancient genome. Beyond Maori ancestry, New Zealand's European settlers carried with them a completely different set of genetic influences. Unlike in many colonized regions, where indigenous genetics became diluted over time, Maori DNA has remained remarkably distinct. Even after nearly 2 centuries of intermarriage and cultural blending, studies show that Maori ancestry markers are still well preserved. This suggests not just a strong genetic foundation, but also a deep cultural resilience that has shaped identity at the molecular level. Then there's the unexpected genetic signatures found in modern New Zealanders. The National Geographic Genographic Project revealed traces of Mediterranean, South Asian, and even African ancestry in participants who had assumed they were solely of European or Maori descent. How did these genes arrive in New Zealand? Some may have come through obscure maritime trade routes, others through the waves of immigrants who arrived in the 19th and 20th centuries. It proves that human movement is never as straightforward as history books suggest. Genes carry the evidence of forgotten journeys, lost stories, and connections that span continents. And while we can study human DNA, what about the genes of the animals and plants that were part of New Zealand's past? Ancient DNA recovered from extinct species, like the moa and Haast's eagle, is revealing the genetic history of an entire lost ecosystem. These discoveries show that, just as human DNA carries echoes of migration and adaptation, so too does the DNA of the environment itself. Could these genetic blueprints one day help scientists restore elements of New Zealand's vanished biodiversity? Some believe the answer isn't just theoretical. Advances in genetics are bringing the possibility of de-extinction closer than ever before. The deeper we dive into New Zealand's genetic landscape, the clearer it becomes that every strand of DNA holds a hidden narrative. What other forgotten histories are encoded within modern New Zealanders? And how many more revelations are still waiting to be uncovered in the next generation of genetic research? New Zealand's genetic future is being written right now, shaped by science, technology, and the ever-evolving diversity of its people. While we've uncovered the ancient origins of its DNA, the next chapter is all about where it's headed, and the possibilities are both fascinating and unpredictable. One of the most exciting breakthroughs in genetic research is the ability to track how populations are evolving in real time. With advances in whole genome sequencing, scientists are beginning to understand how modern lifestyles, diet, and even environmental changes are influencing the DNA of New Zealanders today. Could urbanization, new diseases, or even climate change lead to measurable shifts in genetic expression over the next few generations? Some researchers believe that subtle genetic adaptations are already occurring, even if we don't yet fully understand their long-term effects. Another major development is in medical genetics. New Zealand's unique genetic landscape means that its populations, both Maori and non-Maori, have distinct health risks and susceptibilities. Scientists are now using genetic data to develop more personalized healthcare solutions. Imagine a future where medicine is tailored to an individual's genetic makeup, where doctors can predict and prevent diseases before they even appear. Already, research into Maori and Pacifica genomes is helping identify genetic markers linked to conditions like diabetes and cardiovascular disease, opening the door to treatments that could transform lives. But with great power comes great responsibility. As genetic technology advances, so do ethical questions. Who owns genetic data? How should it be used? And what happens when genetic research intersects with identity, culture, and history? For Maori communities, these questions are especially important. The concept of whakapapa, ancestry and genealogy, is deeply woven into Maori identity. Any use of genetic information must be handled with care, ensuring that research benefits communities rather than exploiting them. That's why many Maori leaders and scientists are actively involved in shaping the future of genetic research in Aotearoa, ensuring that science and tradition move forward together. Then there's the controversial idea of genetic engineering. CRISPR technology has made it possible to edit genes with precision, raising the question, could we one day see genetic modifications in New Zealanders? While the idea of designer babies remains firmly in the realm of science fiction for now, genetic engineering is already being explored for conservation purposes. Scientists are investigating ways to use gene editing to protect native species, fight invasive pests, and even restore parts of New Zealand's lost biodiversity. But where should the line be drawn? Could altering the genes of native species have unintended consequences for ecosystems? These are the debates that will shape the future of genetic science in New Zealand. Ultimately, DNA is more than just a biological code. It's a map of where we've been and a glimpse of where we're going. The genetic story of New Zealand isn't finished. In fact, it's just beginning. With each discovery, we're not only learning about the past, but also unlocking the potential for a healthier, more informed, and ethically responsible future. The question is, how will we choose to use this knowledge?